Ladies and gentlemen, Otsile, he has
Hey,
arrived. How's it going, brother?
I'm good. How you doing? I was actually about to make a cup of coffee, but it seems like that won't work.
Oh no, it's fine. Take your time. You can go get the coffee and we'll get started after that.
All right. How you doing, Ed?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I had to leave the office a bit early just to get going on the call. So we
My
grab that
man.
cup of coffee and then we can have a real divers having coffee session.
Right there with you. I'm gonna get a refill myself.
All right. Cool stuff. Alrighty.
Welcome back. My coffee is
Hello,
just
hello, hello. Just about ready.
ready. And there it is. Cheers to that, brother. That's awesome. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I'm really excited about the work you're doing and the brand and community that you're nurturing out there. Afrodivers go deep. My coffee needs to wake me up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's exciting to be with you.
awesome. Let's get it started. I'm recording the Zoom call. If you have some time after this, we could do a quick IG live. It's up to you. Then yeah, I'll be sharing it across different platforms. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's Divers Getting Coffee with Mr. Otsile at Afrodivers Go Deep.
Hey,
welcome aboard.
How are you doing, Ed?
Good.
Good.
Looking forward to diving with you one day. But first, can you just introduce yourself to the audience real quick? And
Sure. I'm Otsile, and yeah, it's really divers having coffee. It's a late coffee for me because it's 4 early evening, I guess. But yeah,
4 p.m.
Who's Otsile? Otsile is a South African guy who fell in love with the ocean about last year, November. It was the first time I went diving, fell in love with it. I did my open water in Ponta de Ouro in Mozambique. So that's about an 8-hour drive from Johannesburg. And how that came to be was I literally got into the car one day. I hadn't taken leave or taken a vacation for about 2 years. So I jumped in the car and I'm like, I'm going east. And I don't know where, but I'll get there. And I drove out around 10 at night. I sort of booked some accommodation just for the night. And then the following morning, I crossed the border into Mozambique and found a really great dive center out there. Did my open water, fell in love with it. And that was where the idea for Afrodivers came from. So my dive instructor happens to be a black guy in Mozambique, dreadlock Rasta guy, all good, like the happiest person on the planet. And we were the only 2 black guys on the dive boat at the time. And I got off the boat and we had a few of the local guys sort of intrigued that, hey, wait, normally, okay, Martin we're used to seeing coming off the boat, but it's quite different to see another black person coming off the boat. And they came to ask me about how the dive experience was. And that's pretty much where the idea for Afrodivers was born from. Came back into South Africa, did all the business stuff and got the center up and running. So here we are.
That's an amazing story, an impromptu getaway, last minute getaway that turned into something for the culture.
Business, yeah.
That's amazing,
and passion.
And you're located in Johannesburg, right?
Yeah, we're located in Johannesburg. So we're fortunate enough because my parents have some extra land that they're not really doing much with. So we've been in talks sort of to try and see if we can actually build a physical dive center out that
Hmm.
way. That won't be in Pretoria though. That'll be in Pretoria. It won't be in Johannesburg. It'll be in Pretoria.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so we're hoping within the next 2 years to sort of actually have a physical dive center, compressor rooms, the works, have everything there geared and ready to go.
That's amazing. Looking forward to seeing that come to fruition. Um,
Yeah, it's a
and amazingly, in Mozambique, in Africa, it's what you said was very powerful. The locals were sort of surprised, gladly so,
yeah,
seeing two black people come off the dive boat. Typically, it's not
yeah,
the crowd, right?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
amazing. That's amazing.
yeah,
It, so that's a great story about how you learned to dive. I'm still processing because it's something that I never personally thought about. I started diving a few years ago, but I learned in California, here in California.
okay,
It wasn't really back of mind because I guess I'm just used to being, I'll rephrase. It was something I never really thought about until I was talking recently, and that's kind of why Divers Getting Coffee started. Talking
hmm,
recently to someone, I realized, wait a minute, I've probably only ever gone diving with one other black person, but over time, over time, I
yeah,
had connected with other black divers across the world,
yeah,
and it was something that was just interesting, and that perspective you just shared is something that it's very unique. It's a very unique experience, and I'm
yeah,
glad we're sitting down having this coffee talk. So welcome
yeah.
again, Joe Berg in the house. Woo woo.
Hello. Yeah,
Let's
it's
see.
it's a very unique one because I mean I still go out diving. So it's about 2 weeks ago. So as a dive center, we had our first open waters qualifying. So we had two ladies that were qualifying, one from Joburg, one from Durban. And so the one lady came down with her partner, and so we had four guys. So he did his try dive on the same weekend,
Mhm.
and it was just beautiful watching that culmination of the dream where like now you've gone from usually being just the only black guy on the boat and there's like four of you and they're coming through your dive center.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is like that guy fell in love with the ocean as well. And I think about a day or two ago, he gives me a call. He's like, look, man, I need to do my open water course. I'm bringing my three kids with as well. They've got to experience this whole thing. So it's just sort of becoming this infectious movement, if I could
Hmm.
call it that, or club or whatever. And we had a weekend away, I think it was about a month ago now, where literally was my first time where every single diver on the trip was just all black. We went to a little pond, or yeah, I'd call it a pond because it's not huge. It's about 13
Hmm.
meters deep, but it's crystal clear water, crystal clear
Wow.
spring, and that's in the northwest province. So it's an inland dive spot, and there were six of us, and it was just all black divers. So just watching the pieces start coming together bit by bit, and just pushing on. It's great to watch that dream come to life. So
That's amazing, and it's a community, it's a movement, and it's also a dive center that's actually certifying, uh, teaching people how to dive. I was actually just
yeah.
watching one of your videos, and it's a question I get often, which is something I personally struggled with when I started. Uh,
Hmm.
at the time, I could barely swim, so it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
just the will to want to do it, a little bit of comfort being in the ocean or
yeah,
being in water, and
yeah,
then
yeah,
a lot of learning, a lot of humility just to learn, watch videos, practice. By the time, that helped me get through the first few certs. By the time I was
hmm,
doing my DM, I had to like take time to go to adult classes, and I'm sure
yeah,
you get that a lot because a couple of your videos specifically
yeah.
address that. First of
That
all,
swimming aspect, yeah.
the swimming aspect. Did you personally
Hmm.
have any challenges when you started, and how you overcame them? And just being that you get a lot of those kind of questions as well, is there
Yeah,
something you
yeah.
want to touch on in that topic of just the initial hump?
Right. So fortunately for me, I learned to swim at a relatively young age. I think I was around 10 or so. Wasn't always the strongest swimmer. I think diving sort of added to becoming a bit more confident and more free in the water. So that's just the one aspect. I think for me personally, that was maybe just that little benefit of having learned to swim relatively early on, or being comfortable in the water relatively early on. But what I've noticed is with a few of the guys that sort of ask questions around wanting to get the dive experience and so on, a lot of the times what we've set up is a swim to scuba journey. So they do about 2 months of swim class, get competent enough to pass the swim test on the open water. And then from that, their water journey begins from there. So it's been really pleasant to watch a few. We've got 2 of the guys that are currently enrolled on the Swim to Scuba program, and they've both just completed their first month. So we've just gotten into level 1 on the lockdown side of things, so we're able to do a little bit more, given the COVID situation and all of that. But they've gone through their first month of swimming. And literally watching people go from complete novices in the water to getting a little bit more comfortable with that caveat of ultimately going scuba diving and being in the water a bit more. It's really, really great. And I think also, given the demographic that we focus on, we kind of expected the need to improve swimming to be a key hurdle for a lot of the guys. The lady that qualified, her name is Komocho. And when she qualified, so we did her first pool session, and literally was one of those, she had to go back and do an additional course on the swimming side of things before she actually got that. And she went out, did the month of swimming, came back, finished the course, and she actually qualified. So it just shows that yes, it might be a hurdle, but I mean, if we've got the right plans and the right systems in place to sort of overcome that hurdle, it makes things better. What I noticed myself, was a really funny story, sorry. Is last weekend, and I think you had a chat with Zandile on your channel.
Yes.
So she was in Joburg, and I'm like, we had just finished diving that morning. I hear her voice, I hear her laugh. I'm like, nah, that's definitely Zandi. And I'm like calling out, and she's not hearing me. I'm like, okay, let me go get my fins, get my goggles, and I'm gonna swim out. And I mean, it's a dam. The bottom at certain points, I think the deepest part of the dam is around 30-40 meters, and there I am swimming out, no issues, no care in the world. And I'm like, that's the beauty of diving, that I can look back in my life and be like, just that water comfort. I would have never thought of venturing out to swim across a dam. In as much as I can swim, I would have never done that. And just that water comfort, now I'm like, yeah, it's all right, I'll get there and I'll swim back and life goes on. So I would say there's elements of overcoming certain fears as well of being in the water. So yeah.
That's amazing. And you did it with, it built up the confidence to the point where you felt just more, what's the word I'm looking for? Comfortable to be able to just go in and swim across it. Yeah, this needs to happen. And it also makes you, as a diver, it also makes you aware of, or keep in mind, certain, currents or riptides and things like that, just to be safe. But that's an amazing story. Yeah, Zandy is awesome. She's such a great person. How, I know you just mentioned that South Africa just went back to level 1, tier 1, for the pandemic. How has that affected operations for you and diving in general? Out here in California, we started diving again maybe a couple months ago, but the first few months, everything was still so bleak and just unknown. Everything was completely shut down for a while. So what's the experience been during this pandemic for operations in diving?
So we started the dive center in March, and that was literally just before the country locked down. So we took a group of about 9 guys to Mozambique as our first tour, did their try dives, and then coming back into the country, 2 weeks later, the country's like shut down, so you can't do a thing. So we had about 2 months of just sitting. As soon as we hit around level 3, we could sort of start getting a bit of traction again. I was fortunate enough to have the ability to sort of travel between provinces because I had a permit. So that sort of helped us get started with the one student in Durban, because that's obviously in a different province. So we got started on her course around level 3, but we couldn't qualify her up until sort of the interprovincial travel was completely open. But for me, the benefit of the lockdown was, I mean, I learned a lot of skills that helped the dive center. In the sense that I learned to edit my own videos during the lockdown, and really that's where a large part of the drive to get our content out and to get our brand out happened during that hard lockdown, because I had nothing else to do but just market and push. So that was, it was, I'd say it was a blessing, in that it allowed us to really get that traction for Afrodivers and to establish the brand, and just really push it out there. So as soon as we were able to move out, then we started doing a bit more. I spent quite a lot of time in the pool during the lockdown because we couldn't really get anywhere else. And middle of winter, I'm like sitting with a 5 mil wetsuit in 14 degrees weather. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but yeah, that was that.
That's interesting. It's a double-edged sword, you know, the whole pandemic and how it happened. All plans are pretty much just kind of canceled. But one thing I've noticed is that a lot of people, or I want to think a lot of people took time to just buckle down on stuff that you find interesting, stuff that's you've been kind of working yourself, improve yourself, things you've been procrastinating on for a while. Just give it a shot and go for it, you know. You know, it's unfortunate that it took that for us to kind of realize, take a step back and focus on what's important. But
it was like a big reset button for the world.
It was like, you know, Mother Nature just said, you know, hold on, sit, go to your room. That's awesome. And so a lot of your diving has been in, that's amazing that you started recently, but I always say as well that it's not how long, it's how well you've been doing. Sounds like you've been doing a lot of diving, a lot of in that short period. So that's amazing. So your dives have been in South Africa, Mozambique
and South Africa mainly.
So that's amazing.
From November, from November when I qualified, I like literally if I felt the urge to go dive, I'd jump in the car, drive to Mozambique, get a few dives and drive back. And then funny enough, ironically, my first dives in South African waters was this past month, or end of August. Was the first time I dived on the coast in South Africa. So I did the baited dive in Aliwal Shoal, and then we did the qualifying dives for the students in Sudwana, and that was actually my first time diving in South African waters. So very, very interesting side of it. And then there's a few inland dive spots as well, which is sort of on my to-do list. But yeah, it's been fun. So since November till now, like official dives, I think I've logged about 35. So
that's good.
Relatively
that's a good ramp up.
Yeah. So I've started my rescue course, and that should probably get done mid-October. And just working my way up to becoming an instructor. So at least even the students that we do get coming in through Afrodivers, I'm actually able to instruct those students myself. So
that's awesome. What's been the most interesting experience so far with your dives? I know there are a lot of cool things there. I have like, you know, places like the Sardine Run on my bucket list. I can relate with the kelp forests, and I think it's just off of Cape Town, because it's very similar to what we have in California as well. But what's been your most interesting dive so far, and why?
Most interesting dive so far? Definitely the baited dive on Aliwal Shoal. A lot of big game. So firstly, with Aliwal Shoal, there's a saying when you dive Aliwal Shoal that Africa's not for sissies, because they just launch and the swells are crazy. So it was a windy day, number one. We had, I think it was probably at the time about 1.5 to 2 meter swells, and they literally just launched through that. So you just throw the boat out over that. It's a 7-kilometer boat ride, so it's quite a distance from the point that you guys launch from,
and then rough waters.
Once we got there, so it's a bit choppy. Once we got there, literally the first 7 meters of the descent was a little bit murky, and then you get this clear patch. And from the time we descended, I don't know if you saw the video, but from the time we started our descent, there's already sharks around us. There's a few oceanic blacktip reef sharks. So we descended with them around us. We get to the bottom of the reef. It was Howard's Castle. And as we get to the bottom of the reef, we've got like 2 potato bass that are just parking off there, chilling there. And the sharks just start swimming between us. And it was just a crazy, crazy experience. We had a butterfly ray. probably with the wingspan as tall as I am, I'm sure is a good 2 meters almost in terms of the wingspan of the ray. But just the amount of big game that you see on that particular dive. After we finish that dive, we get back on the boat, swap cylinders, and you head to the next point of the reef that you're going to drop on, and we drop. The viz was around 10 meters or so, and literally you're swimming along and you just see the silhouette of like a ragged-tooth shark, and you're like, wait a minute, is that a shark? You get a little bit closer and you're like, that's a shark right there. So just the sheer amount of stuff that's there on that dive yeah, I don't even have the words for it.
That's crazy.
So that sort of hit the top of the list. And then Sodwana Bay, very different diving experience for me, because all of a sudden where I'm used to seeing all these big stuff on the reef, all of a sudden now you got to look for nudie branches, and it's all about these tiny little things. So that mind shift to looking for the little things, and next thing you've got an octopus that's there little in its den, and I'm sure I spent about 10 minutes just watching that octopus. It's like, wait a minute, I'm really looking at an octopus right now, you know. So I've had pleasant times. The kelp forest is definitely on my to-do list, but it's just been pleasant diving.
That's amazing.
Pleasant diving. Yeah.
I'm gonna try to pull up the video now. It's crazy, like, you know, with like you just said about sharks, you know, we understand them. We understand that Jaws just give, you know, the reputation they have came from Hollywood, but there's also just that awe when you see them in person, that respect you have for these apex predators, right? Let's see if we can find that video real quick. You mentioned that you posted that, right?
It's just above the one that your mouse is on now.
That's this one?
That's the one there, yeah.
That's awesome. And
so yeah, that area is about 30 minutes outside of Durban. It's called Umkomaas, but that's literally where the shoal, where Aliwal Shoal sits. So you launch from there. It's really amazing.
That's awesome. And I got to tell you, man, I love your videos. Very super, super informative and super entertaining too. And I just love your style of filming and storytelling. This is really good stuff. And wow.
This guy, Emil, the guy that we launched with, was the only guy willing to go out that day with the choppy waters. And when we were on the way back, we noticed now a few of the guys were like, that's cool. Let's just actually get going and do the dive. So we were actually the first boat out that morning. It was really, really cool. So that's on the descent. Like, I think we'd just broken the surface, and I'm looking down, and you have a few of the
right there
just around us. Yeah.
That's amazing. What's that, a grouper?
Yeah, potato bass. It's a grouper. Yeah.
Nice.
We call them potato bass out of here.
So. that's awesome.
Same.
This is really cool. I mean, I'm glad that you're sharing that information. I'm glad that you know, you have these stories out here, and I'm super glad that we're getting to talk about it. That you've just actually literally just put out a little shoal. Shoal. Oh, like I told, yeah. A little shoal on my list for when I'm in South Africa. That's amazing. Now, what's on your bucket list? The top 2 things. I'm sure all divers have a bucket list that we kind of run through.
Top of my bucket list is Blue Corner Palau. I've seen a few videos, and it just grabbed me. So that's right at the top. And then I'd probably say shortly after that, I'm really keen to do Cape Town. Seen a lot of beautiful footage from the kelp forest. It just looks so serene and so surreal. So that's the one. But right at the top of my bucket list is Palau, Blue Corner. Yeah, that's like my ultimate dive at the moment.
That's I think that's a lot of people's dives, a lot of people's bucket lists. And I have a few friends that have done they've done so many places in the world, and you ask them like, where's the best place you've ever gone diving, or your favorite, your top of the list, After going through a bunch of options back and forth, it typically ends up with, hands down, it was Palau, so
Yeah, yeah,
I'm sure it's going to be great.
yeah.
Now,
That's on the list.
what was the, starting on a whim, starting getting into diving, going through the process, understanding, the typical fears, the demographic you're targeting on, typically have. What's the one advice you kind of give someone starting out or someone interested in diving that, yeah, what's the one thing you think they should know, especially being that you actually train divers as well, or your dive center gets people to learn how to dive and get certified and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Best advice I would have for somebody looking to dive, excuse me, is just breathe. It's possible. I think just that fear out of talking to a few of the guys, when they realize, wait, I can actually take a breath underwater and still be fine and explore.
Mm-hmm.
That's just that first thing is literally, man, just breathe, relax, and just breathe. That's that. I've realized it's really just a process of working through fears, man. My first time putting a regulator in my mouth, and I jump in the pool and I'm like, dude, you're gonna die. You're gonna die. You're gonna die. You're gonna die. What are you doing? You're gonna die. And you're breathing and you realize, okay, I'm not dying, And I mean, my instructor was a really firm guy at some point, and I want to bolt for the surface, and he literally just pulls me back down. He's like, dude, calm down. Whatever you can do underwater, whatever you can do on the surface, you can do underwater. Just chill,
Mm-hmm.
And even when I did my first qualifying dive, I mean, I think after we got to about 10 meters, I'm like, hey, I'm getting out of here. And I like bolt up for the surface, and I get there and he's like, look, man, the surface is not the best place to be. Where you actually want to be is underwater. It's a lot more calmer,
Right.
a lot more chilled. You're going to feel a lot better. Just breathe and relax. And working through that process of just keep on breathing and relax, and that's the best advice I'd give to anybody that puts a regulator in their mouth for the first time.
That's amazing, because just breathing, staying calm, taking it in, it's a very transformative experience, So you want to enjoy that, and when you're breathing and staying calm, you can actually process what's going on around you, anticipate things, actually get the opportunity to dive plan. Yeah. What was it like for you the first time you took that breath on the water? How did that feel?
Other than thinking I was gonna die. As soon as you calm down and you start realizing that you're seeing this whole new world, you're seeing things that almost 80% of the planet might never see with their own eyes, other than seeing through a camera lens, and taking it all in, and you realize, the bigness of the small and the smallness of the big, and you just get to experience all of that. It's a crazy experience, man. I still get chills when I think about it, and just literally thinking, wow, man, you're doing stuff that some people might never ever get to experience, and it almost becomes like a duty to sort of get people to come and experience that with you. It's crazy. Once you get over that I'm gonna die phase, everything just becomes so serene, so beautiful. It's almost meditative, man. I mean now, compared to a couple of years back, now when I get stressed out or I've had a crazy week or whatever, the first thing I think about is, man, let's go blow bubbles.
Get in the water.
That becomes now your happy place. That becomes like your peace. So from the first time until then, it's the experience is crazy.
It's an amazing feeling, because you're going down for the first time and your mind is telling you, just like you said, your mind is saying, fool, you're gonna die. Because what you see, you're being trained to learn how to dive, but your mind is still saying,
say, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? This is not for you. This is not normal, man. This is just not normal.
I was watching a couple friends try out Discover Scuba the other day, a couple weeks ago, And
Yeah.
I kind of just went down to the bottom and just waited for them while the instructor is, helping them get down. And one of them, I gave him hell for it. I could see, I was watching him and I saw that one moment he went under, got
Yeah.
below the surface and realized, oh my God, what have I done? It's like,
should I even be here?
it's like skydiving. I feel my experience has always been that fraction of a second that you fall out of the plane, your mind tells you, oh, you don't mess up now,
Yeah.
and then it feels good. And then
You've
it
gone
just,
skydiving?
what's that?
You've gone skydiving?
I've gone a couple times. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's one of those things I enjoy.
You.
Oh,
Yeah.
brother, we got to experience everything, right?
Yeah.
I don't ever see myself like pursuing it to do it myself. I've only done the tandem dives,
The
but
tandem,
yeah, but it's an amazing experience. That's super awesome.
I had a crazy experience the first time I decided I was gonna go bungee, and that
Ooh,
sort of
that's
kind
something I
of
haven't
put me
done.
off. Yeah, it sort of put me off of jumping out of planes and stuff. It's like, okay, I could do deep water for now. But I think that's probably one of the fears I still have to overcome is doing the whole tandem and bungee and all of that. I'll probably get to it. But yeah, when you come down to South Africa, if you do, there's a few cool skydiving places. And then we've got I believe it's one of the highest bungee jumping spots
Oh wow.
in the world, which is Tsitsikamma. So if you come dive with us in SA, I'll
My
bring
man.
Tsitsikamma.
My man.
we'll go bungee jumping.
We'll do it. What are the so I know Cape Town is popular with the kelp forest, right? And what other places in South Africa are pretty popular? I see Zandy doing a lot of diving out there. I think she was just in Cape Town herself, right?
Yeah. She was in Cape Town. The week before we went to Sodwana Bay, like while we were driving there, she's like, hey man, I hear you're about to get to Sodwana. It's going to be insane. There's whales out there. There's so many amazing stuff. And from just my own research, I've seen Sodwana Bay hits quite a few of the top dive spots in the world. That list quite often. That's one place where the micro life it's splendid, man. You got 20 meters of viz on average most of the time, and you've got just the most healthy, because that's probably the one reef in South Africa that's been protected for the longest. So the health of the reef it's immaculate. I mean, I did just before we took the students out, I did a dive the day before, just sort of know what to expect and what they might find. And you get down there and you've got like eels in the crevices, you got the nudie branches, you got just all of these colors everywhere, and it's pristine. It's a really beautiful spot. I think that's one of the big attractions in SA. And then some of the inland spots I've seen, I had a chance, when I did my advanced certification, I did that at a place called Komati Springs. So it's an old asbestos mine, which sort of filled in with water. And normally a lot of the cave divers, a lot of the tech divers do that because the bottom, once you jump into the shaft area, the bottom is about 54 meters. So if your buoyancy is off, you're going straight down, you know. But literally, it's almost like you're diving along the side of a mountain cliff, and you've just got this sheer rock face, and you just swim along that. And also for me, probably one of my prettiest experiences. But for a lot of people, including myself as well, Sodwana Bay hits the list for quite a few people.
That's really cool. Those kind of wall dives, or I guess kind of a wall dive can be interesting. And you said it right. You know, getting that buoyancy on point is really good because, especially for bottomless or near bottomless dives like that, just knowing that the bottom is so far down can be very intimidating to anyone. You know, to anyone the first time. But once you get in, get comfortable, you know, have some confidence in your buoyancy, it usually works out. So that's great. Something very interesting you mentioned, which is why Afrodivers Go Deep kind of started, right? Is that scuba diving is not as a sport as a recreational activity is not particularly common amongst Black people.
People of color, yeah.
People of color in general. It's something that in America, it's kind of the same. In Nigeria, most of Africa, it's very similar. One thing I did notice is that in the Caribbean, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Because everybody dives. It's normal. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it's very normal to, it's normal, not even a thing. So I'm just curious to know, like in South Africa, I'm assuming in South Africa, it's still kind of the same. It's not particularly popular yet.
It's not particularly popular, no. I mean, I still go out, even on the weekends, I go out most of the time. It's just me as a Black person. So it's really, really not common, but I think part of that fuels us to sort of break that stereotype and get more people into it.
That's great. Well, obviously, it's subjective. Why do you think that is?
I think historically, just playing in water wasn't always the most encouraged thing, I remember I'd come home at times and it's like I was swimming in a friend's pool and my parents were just like, hey man, why? So it wasn't always the most encouraged thing. And as much as I was able to swim and all of that stuff, and even with a few of the guys that I've spoken to, you might find in a lot of the areas, some of the places where you might be able to learn to swim is just the public pools. They're not always that well kept. So some people probably never really get to go experience that. If you look at a lot of the township areas and the village areas, you find if people go and swim in a little dam or whatever, you get home and you're in trouble for that because, you might have drowned, or it's just the risks that are perceived with water. I mean, it's crazy when you look at, especially like I look at Durban, where you've got a whole Zulu population, people of color living along the coast, but again, playing in the water is not a common thing, So I think it's largely the risks we tend to associate around water as a demographic. And then I think also we have an opportunity to sort of phase that out generationally. Maybe with our generation, we're a bit more comfortable. Our kids and the generation that come after that will probably also be a lot more comfortable in the water than what we were, if I could put it that way. So I think it's largely just from playing in water being something you'd get into trouble for generally, and just those risks associated with it.
That's awesome. That's very insightful. I like the way you put it because I can actually relate with that. Growing up in Lagos, Nigeria, it's a beach city. And actually, as a family, we spend a lot of time on the beach for, Easter, Christmas, any excuse to get to the beach. However, the one thing you don't do is go into the water.
You can look at it, you can do whatever,
but
just don't go
near
in.
it, but just don't go in it. Which maybe one of the first things that got me curious about just being in the water, just seeing footage from whatever it was at the time, just underwater shots in movies or things like that. Then as I got older, I used to sneak away into, there's a public pool close to where I lived. I said sneak away because it wasn't something that was completely approved. That would have gone down well. And over time, like you said, now we have the access to it, and we got interested in it. So it's something we'll try to phase out over time, which is great because then that's why you're an ambassador in this sport. Like whether you like it or not, it's like you're experiencing these things that a lot of people in general will probably not even get to experience, except maybe through your footage. But specifically, a lot of Black people are probably not even interested in. But this kind of conversation we're having, the kind of videos you share, go a long way in help molding that, nurturing that relationship with the ocean. So that's amazing.
That's true. And I've noticed sort of just that interest from a lot of people, because one of the things I noticed is just to sort of generate the interest that we were looking at generating, I almost had to be out diving almost every weekend. And just over the last couple of months, I've noticed there's genuine interest from people that would have never thought of doing it, because the more people like yourself and I go and explore and do all of these things, the more normal it becomes to somebody else, where now all of a sudden it's not this far thought, but you're like, hey, no, man, I know Ed, I've seen Ed in the water before, and it's not a foreign, it becomes
It,
less of a foreign concept.
right.
So,
It's more reachable. Just like, oh yeah, you know what?
yeah,
I think I can do that too. So that's cool. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
And
So
this is a
it's really
great mission.
exciting.
Really glad we got a chance to connect. Where can we find you online?
So on social media, we're on Facebook and Instagram. It's at Afrodivers Go Deep. On YouTube, it's just at Afrodivers. And what else are we on? Yeah, I'm almost done with our website, so that should be going up in the next month or so. And that is afrodivers.co.za. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting people from all over the world to come out and dive with us. One of the things I'm just to add, yeah, I think
Yeah.
I'm blabbing a lot.
I
We started
love your
chatting.
storytelling.
We started chatting to a black-owned dive center in Maryland. I'm not sure which state Maryland is in, but sort of just getting that dialogue, because I realized a lot of people in the States, when they think diving, they're like, okay, cool, you got Bali, you got
Mm-hmm.
Cozumel and all of those areas in South Africa. When they think Africa, they think Red Sea. And you got this
True.
pristine pocket of diving down in South Africa. So we're looking to partner up with them and try and get a few more people out to come and dive the South African coast. It is a lot of adventure, but yeah, it's one of the exciting things that we're looking at doing.
That's awesome. That's actually great you mentioned that, and the collaboration is good. It's something I guess we should be talking about at some point, hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Partnering up and collaborating that way. One last question before you go. Where are you looking to take Afro? What's your vision for Afrodivers Go Deep? I love what you're doing so far. I mean, it's already showing in your in the storytelling and the information you're sharing people and the actual act of getting people to learn to dive and get certified and build that relationship with the ocean. But what else? What do we see? What else should we be expecting from Afrodivers Go Deep?
So my vision, I mean, go big or go home, right?
Mm.
So my vision is I'd love to firstly have a national presence. So in the three main dive areas in South Africa, so Joburg having a spot inland, and then probably a center down on the coast, either Cape Town or Joburg. I mean Cape Town or Durban. And then possibly looking at setting up a center as well in Mozambique, up in Kenya, and maybe as far out as Tanzania. But that's the big plan and the big picture, just to grow the center and get a continental footprint. And then my wild idea as well is to sort of try and see how much of Africa is diveable. So just do whatever diveable place there is on the African continent, go out and experience that. So that's the big one for me.
I love it. I love it. And that's a lot of things like you mentioned earlier. When people think of Africa diving, it's typically the Red Sea or that, that patch of Africa. But there are a lot of actually lesser known places around. After I started diving, I found out about the kind of the dive sites close to Nigeria. There are places in Cape Verde, and that's going to be a cool adventure, going around and exploring the diveable places around Africa. So that's good. Looking forward to it. Definitely at some point, we're definitely going to be collaborating on something. We definitely have chats offline, but it was really nice to have you on today. And thank you for taking the time, sharing the information with everyone. Anything else? Any other afterthoughts before we wrap it up?
Just a question for you. You asked me so many questions. What's your bucket list dive, and what was your craziest dive moment?
Let's start with bucket list. I think craziest dive. Okay, I'll flip it. Craziest dive, or the most interesting dive I think I've had was the dive in Iceland between the two continental plates. It's Silfra. That's correct.
Yeah,
it's something that it was one of the reasons I got my dry suit certification. At the time, I had no plans to go to Iceland, but I had seen it and I really wanted it. And, you know, when I was picking specialization, I was like, well, yeah, I guess I'll do dry suit too. California is cold, but I don't feel like I need a dry suit in California. People do wear it, but it's not, it's, you know, it's fine. So I solely had silver in mind when I did my dry suit cert.
Yeah.
And maybe a couple years later, out of nowhere, I just happened to be in Iceland. The very first thing I did was, you know, set up the pickup, and from airport to the center of Reykjavik and straight to Silfra to go through that dive. And it was well worth it. It's definitely a novelty dive. It's, you know, it's a pre-set route. There isn't any sea life, you know, there aren't that many animals in it. Maybe a few fish here and there, algae mostly. But just, again, it brings down the it's hard to express. You look at one landmass. This is North America, and it goes in all the way into the North American landmass, and then look at the other one, kind of goes into the Euro-Asian, and getting the opportunity to kind of dive in between both of them, and it just feels very majestic. It was very well worth. It's definitely worth the hype. One of the best dives, one of the best experiences. Viz was incredibly clear, probably the clearest water I've been in. In the ocean, there even when it's clear, there's still, you know, little particles here and there.
Little particles and stuff, yeah.
But apparently, the water in Sofra is going through just the underground streams and everything, is filtered over and over and over and over again. So by the time it comes into that little creek that you dive, it's just super clear and super cold. But it does feel like being an astronaut. It's probably one of the closest things. Other than the bubbles, you just feel like you're floating in stuff, you know? So that was really good. For bucket lists, and there are other places have their own charm, their own what they bring to the table. But I think that's been one of my top favorite dives ever. Even though, you know, I like the big fish, the big game, the big animals, there was nothing in there for me to see, but it was just the experience of it that made it feel really good. For bucket list, definitely Palau is on my list. And I have a thing for wrecks. So Truk Lagoon has been kind of on my list for a while. I was on the fence about going there this year, but obviously that's out the window. So eventually one day, but I those are probably the two top items on my bucket list. Not sure about the logistics. So eventually maybe we'll end up in Palau one day and dive together.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Why not? Yeah, so that's it for me.
That's awesome.
Those were my questions.
Thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to connect with you. Stay connected, and eventually collaborate with you one day. Loving what you're doing. You guys heard it here first at Afrodivers Go Deep, premier scuba diving center based out of South Africa, but approaching and reaching out to the world. Thank you, Otsile.
Thank you.
Pleasure. All right.